Cellar one more time. And try to enjoy this one 2 or 3 times as much as you normally would. I'll explain later. Pardon me. How rude. I love spending part of my Saturday in the Cellar. Thank you for hosting. I heard in the early days of D&D that you worked with Jaquays, who went on to a long and influential career in our hobby and profession. Do you have any history about the adventures she designed for those early D&D products from TSR and Judges Guild? I'm currently reading through the Goodman Games revision and reprint of The Dark Tower and reading the essays on Jaquays' work. I've learned how much influence she had on my time as a DM and the adventures I've written for my games over the decades. Okay, I don't want to offend anybody, especially any of Janelle's family, friends, or loved ones. I first met the person who became known as Janelle Jaquays before she transitioned. I knew her as Paul. And I had some unsolicited art on my desk, and I needed a piece to fill a hole, that, yada yada. And I used it, and it was Jaquays. And we established a long-term relationship, and when Janelle transitioned, I was, entirely supportive. I didn't really understand it as well as I do now because it was so many years ago. In any event, I always found her to be a wonderful, supportive individual. You should know that besides what she's known for in our industry, she had quite the career in the video game industry and took a lot of what she got out of RPGs and ported it over to the video game industry. And, things like, you always got to wonder where things like, lives and hit points and things like that, they're exactly what we do that are in, and I'm not saying she did it all, but I know she had a big part of it. So she not only infected our industry, but another entire industry, gaming related, or, related by gaming, I should say. I have no knowledge or insight into the stuff she wrote because she started writing that stuff shortly after I left. So I really can't help you there. I'm sorry. But yes, what a remarkable individual. I'm glad to have known both Paul and Janelle. Next. So much of what we did in OD&D and AD&D were give guidelines. Yes, I know. I beat that drum every now and again. I've never, and it's my failing, I'm sure. I've never totally understood why some people have to have rigid rules. I don't understand the mindset. I don't know if it's because they find it more comforting, and I don't know. I've always been kind of a loosey-goosey, not so much color outside the lines as forget the lines were there. So I don't pretend to understand, nor am I condemning. I know there are some people that just have to have rules. They're best personified by Stevel and Brian in The Knights of the Dinner Table. And we always preferred to be more a little loosey-goosey, go with the flow. If the table feels that this is the way it ought to be handled, that's the way we did it. There were a lot of things that we did in Carbondale that were like, well, sort of house ruled and sort of just the way it organically came to be. And of course, I was in contact with Gary constantly. This is what we're doing. This is how it's going. And he was giving me feedback on things I'd said to him, and so I don't understand it. I don't have to. Obviously, I would be egotistical in the extreme to think that I had to or whatever. But I just feel it's more fun being guidelines, and if something feels a little off the way it's written, well, fudge it a little till it doesn't feel off. We're all just there to have a good time and have fun anyway, remember? Too many people forget that. The fun is the thing. The fun is the thing. Otherwise, why are we doing it? I look forward to these chats every Saturday morning when I wake up before I have to. Well, you know what? One of the beauties of YouTube is that they're available 24/7. You can sleep until the afternoon and then get up and watch it. But no, thank you for the sentiment. I appreciate it. And the next one is just heck with it all. He says, I attacked the gazebo. Yeah. Because I refuse to go into politics on this, I will just gonna leave where my head went to right there. No. I'm not gonna. I'm going to the next thing. All right, and now this is a pertinent and recent. I've tried to run D&D at my local library, but ran into the same problems. Poor follow-through on the part of the staff. Their idea of advertising was to do a single post on Facebook at the beginning of the month and a second post on Facebook the day of the first section. They also wanted me to run one-shot adventures and give me 4 hours once a month. The person I needed to communicate with at the library wouldn't answer my questions or pass on my requests to their supervisor. In the end, I started advertising on my own, and they became very upset that I was doing this because I was not library staff. It was just a horrible, terrible experience. And I feel for you, brother. I feel for you. I do. I almost had that today because it was time for the program I'm trying to get off the ground to meet again at the library. And I got there about 5 minutes before, and a distinct lack of eager people clamoring, waiting to go play. But I was heartened by the fact that the head librarian for the branch, the boss, was waiting for me to meet me, and very apologetic on the fact that nothing was happening yet, and then proceeded to outline all the things that they had done and tried so far to get this thing going. And I must admit, I was impressed. They have tried. So now we're going to do some follow-up about, is it the location because of the distance between the branch and the high school? Is it the time? Because classes are out somewhere between 2:10 and 2:40 or something like that, and where this is at 4. If it's a location, I'm sure the library is sure that they'll be able to work with the school board and get us a room in the building. Fine. I'll come up at 2:45 and help get this thing off the ground. We now have a combined campus of both middle and high school, and I see no problem whatsoever. I never have seen problem of this that little of an age gap, really, in role playing. So we're attempting to find out what's going on. We're trying to modify, see what we have to do. The fact that they were so, upset, they seem to be upset about it as I am. So we've reached an understanding that we're going to try some more things, find out what we can do, modify the time of the play, whatever it takes. We're going to keep trying to do this until we get it off the ground. I particularly stress the fact that what a great summer activity this would be, and stressed all the stories I've been told face to face about how D&D and role-playing kept them out of trouble one summer or 2 summers or even 3 summers. All right. Man, Tim, some of your advice is just beautiful. Well, if I knew which ones they were, I'd capture them. Thanks for the gaming and DMing tips. Well, I'm just really not so much. I hope I don't come off as tips. Do it this way, more as opinions and suggestions. And the next one's rather praise. Thanks for the awesome info. As always, rock on. Well, nowadays I kind of gravel on, but thank you for the sentiment. To Tim, Harold, and well, Matt, pulling yourself up by the Excalibur. Were you ever interested in Arthurian mythology? Well, I think I would be willing to bet that an overwhelming preponderance of people that are now reading fantasy or were reading fantasy hit the Arthurian cycle somewhere along the line. I think that's a pretty good bet. So, what place does it hold in my list of influences? It's one of the things that I read before I came to D&D. It's Appendix N worthy, in that I'm sure there are things that I got from it that I have melded over into my fantasy gaming. Do I know how Gary Gygax felt about the Arthurian lore in terms of influence upon D&D? Well, Gary didn't want any one specific lore to dominate the game. Though quests and the various quests of the Knights of the Round Table obviously found their way in. The concept of the game, the overall structure of questing and what it was meant to do and what you would gain from it and that. So, yeah, it had some influence. How much exactly on Gary, I couldn't say. But I know that we talked about, T.H. White and things like that. So, yeah, I'm sure it did. Okay, now this, all right. Oh, wait, gotta finish this. Could you see a fantasy role-playing game that hewed to knightly virtuos being a fun game? Well, I've thought about this a little. Hang on. Not bad. New flavor. Maximum mango. So, there have been role-playing games done that fit specific genre. There was Bushido, which is the most stellar example of the different genre. And there was a Three Musketeers game that came out that was about sword fighting and what have you. And specifics like that have a niche. Now, knightly virtues. Okay, I'm going to guess, I'm going to assume, shame on me, that by knightly virtues we're talking about medieval, roughly, okay, medieval period, medieval knights, okay, whether or not they're wearing full plate armor and shine like bronze in Excalibur, or something more realistic like you might have seen in more recent movies. We're going to talk that period of time. filthy, disease-ridden, rotten food, no morals to speak of, depending, very few morals amongst the lower classes. Quite a bit of criminality amongst the lower classes. Most of it petty, stealing to get by, stealing a crust of bread, whatever. And then you have the middle class, the merchants, and the clergy. Two definite types, different. And then, of course, the aristocracy. So, recognizing those limitations, you could, if you were power mad, set up a game where you send knights out all over the kingdom doing deeds. You could have them screw up and lay a geas on them and make them go do some penitence or some penance, penitent quest of some sort. And they could joust each other, which you can already do with a little chart in the back of chainmail, which is 55, 56 years old now. But fun, they take knightly behaviors into account every year at GaryCon with their Legends of Wargaming, and they have an open list all weekend where you can go in and joust against the reigning champion. Beyond that, getting into the thraldom of females, thralls, slaves, disease. If I was told to design something for this, I'd have a chart or a table that you'd have to roll on every so much passing of time to see if you caught some horrible disease or ate some poisoned meat. Now, granted, you'd have more modifiers if you were higher up on that social scale, but if you were one of those poor schmoes down in the dirt, your next meal could poison you. Or you might not have any next meals for 7 and 8 days and then die of starvation. No, knightly virtues, would everybody be a paladin? Yuck. Unless, I just thought of this, you could form an order of paladins and have a head bishop paladin and set up a campaign where they went out to right wrongs across the area of the kingdom or whatever, or that part of the country, and they would be out there being paladins with broomsticks up their butts doing paladin things. And you had an excuse to be a paladin. Oh, well, just a passing thought. All right. Okay, a question occurred to me concerning a medieval-era town watch or police force in a fairly large town. Looking at older supplements like those from Judges Guild, many NPCs are assigned specific classes and levels, as in the Tyrant Armorer is a 5th level dwarf fighter named Thorgrim Ironstone. Okay, exactly, I remember that, and Judges Guild especially. What level would I assign to a typical medieval cop, if any? Would you make sergeants and captains fairly high-level fighters? This goes back to the old question concept that a fairly high-level group of players, 5th or 7th, could probably just take over a town full of basic schmoes. Okay, I give you an example, Terry Pratchett and his City Watch. I give you an example of the Didius Falco novels, both of Didius Falco and his the sequel set of his daughter, who were they give an intimate explanation of the Vigiles. I always call them the Vigils, Okay, the guys in Rome who did sort of cop things and firefighter things. In the vigilantes. No, in the Roman, they were often ex-legionnaires that were in the top couple of tiers of the command structure. And if you were going to be one, you had to be tough with your fists and a stick. So if I were going to use them as an example, I would make the recruits. Now I'm using this in an old school first edition framework. I would make the recruits 3s. And by the time they're no longer a rookie or a probie, make them a 4. And the majority of them be 4s and 5s, with 6s or 7s as sergeants, and 8s or 9s as commanders. So formidable dudes that you would not want to mess with. And if you're just going to look at a police force, I would make sure that they all basically had max hit points, justified by a rigid program of fitness to be one. Now, in history, was that the case? No. Do you have to do it that way? No. You can have fat ones, bribable ones that can't run fast. But you should have at least a few head knockers that you just don't want to run afoul of. And, unless you're playing in a campaign, you scale them to your campaign, what your player's average level is. And you make sure that at least the top ones are higher. And I don't think you'll have so much of a problem. Now, you can look at the Night Watch, or whatever, I can't remember, in Terry Pratchett's Discworld. And they got fat ones that can barely run, and ones that really aren't all that good in a pinch, and whatever. But it's a comedy. So, depending upon your laugh quotient in your campaign, find something in between. But I certainly wouldn't make them a bunch of schmoes, and I would certainly not make them so wimpy that a bunch of 5 to 7s could come in and take over the town. Absolutely not. There'd be a whole lot of 5 to 7s with either enormous lumps on their skulls or leaks in their bodies somewhere. But that's just me. Your mileage may vary. Okay. Hello. It was great playing in your game at WizardCon last week. Truly something I've wanted to experience for quite some time. A question to present to you, if you please. Upon driving back 8+ hours back to northern Wisconsin, my friend, who was also in your game, and I had an idea. Would it be okay for one of us to run your dungeon at gaming conventions? In your style, with your rules, with a twist at the end that's different than yours. I could email you a surprise twist. We could go about 30 minutes. All right, here. Let me tell you. I saw someone else doing something sort of similar to what I do in the Wheel of Blame. And I said to myself, I think I can do it better. Ha ha ha. And set myself the challenge to do. And I believe I did, and I have. I do it differently. This individual collected the cards and then mixed them all over the place, and they all got into the adventure somewhere, whereas I made every encounter a card. So I find that more challenging because it's all ad lib. Those of you who played know it's ad lib on my part, and I love it when you challenge. Anyway, you can take what you saw at my table and bend it any way you want. The wheel of... I had to have a name for what I was going to do at a convention. And I came up with the Wheel of Blame, thinking of the Wheel of Pain in Conan. And I read something that had a Wheel of Shame. And I thought, okay, Wheel of Blame. So don't call it the Wheel of Blame. Don't have to give me credit for it. If you want to, fine. I'm not going to say don't. But if you've got a way to play it and do it differently, all right, or better, or a twist, be my guest. Be my guest. Now, I'm not meaning to sound cocky or anything, but I've kept it pretty simple, so you better do too, because remember, if you take on running this kind of game, you have no idea what you're going to be doing as you walk up to the table, except that you're going to be playing D&D. When I read the cards, something jumps into my head, and that's where I go. You got to have things in your head ready to jump. I tell you what, you want a mental exercise or stimulus before you try going doing something like this? Get at least 2, and if you can, 3 different sets of story dice. They got them where they sell children's toys or, fancy toys that cost too much, but this is a good investment. Believe me, go online. I'm sure they got them online. And put them all in the bag and shake them up and reach in and take out 3 dice. Roll them, drop them on the table, let them bounce. Line them up in no particular order, not paying attention. And now make up a hook. Make up a hook. Make up a story hook. Okay? And get to where you can do that. It can be silly. It doesn't matter. If you've played in the wheel, you know that we get silly sometimes. But you need that quick acceleration when presented with those cards. And not just the cards, because the cards just kind of tell you how to go along with it and sort of. But the players they're going to take you and they're going to cut away all the stuff that isn't gold. Or as the old sculptor, how do you sculpt? Well, I just cut away all the parts that aren't the bird. Okay, they're going to cut away all the parts that aren't the bird for you. Have fun. Give it a shot. I'm all for fun and trying new things. Good luck. I wish you the best. Okay. All right, now a little more somber. It's not so much fantasy role-playing that's in decline, Tim. It's just that D&D 5.5 or whatever that's not selling. You're right. I don't care to get into socio-political discussion, but for a variety of reasons, the tone of the system didn't appeal. Good spotting. There's a lot of people that felt like that. I believe I'll opine that you're referring to the wokeness. And I don't think people felt like being pushed into an electronic platform. Boy, they lost a bundle on that one. Now, I gotta say, to be fair, the journalist in me says, you gotta try to give both sides. When they plunged into that, we were in the midst of a pandemic like nothing any of us alive had felt. And when somebody gave the go-ahead, we had no idea how long we were going to be living in our basements. It didn't take all that long. Had it, and this is a horrible thing to speculate, but I'm willing to say if it had taken another 6 to 9 months to get an effective vaccine, the idea of playing from the bunker would have taken much deeper hold. They lost a ton. People lost their jobs. Now, the other things that are going on, the designers that are leaving or being shoved out the door or whatever, I think it's indicative of the fact that they have no clear vision of where they want to go, what they want to do, or what the present day consumer wants. But that's just me. We looked at the books a little at the friendly local game store and concluded there was just nothing new that warranted the purchase. Maybe if I was brand new to RPGs, I might feel differently. But I already own every edition from the original. I know the original is brown, white box through 5th. The best thing about 5.5 is that there's a Greyhawk map included in the DMG, but I already have the old 2-piece map from TSR. If I was getting into fantasy RPGs at this point, I'd look elsewhere for rules books. Well, and okay, but what I keep telling myself and what you need to keep in mind, what would be helpful for you to keep in mind, is that we're looking at them from our viewpoint, and they're being pointed at a what to me is like an atrociously new a new market. Young. Oh my God, they're young. Oh Jesus. I mean, they're being pointed at players that are 60 years younger than me. So I try to keep that in mind, because that could be a big reason why I don't understand it. Yeah, when you got a book you like and if you got a book that you're satisfied with, there's no need to get another edition. But if you find, if you got a book, you're hey, I'm cool, I got my D&D books, and then you see something like Mahakitl, or something like Mutant Crawl Classics or that, and that's a whole different ballgame. Because now you're looking at new material, new ideas, and whatever. And they look like they'd be a lark or a break. Mahakitl or Shadow Dark. Mahakitl. Boy, talk about an easy to jump into submersive experience. Whew. All right. TK, hi TK. Imagine your initials of your middle name begin with a P. Yeah, wouldn't that have been ironic? As it was, Chris Clark made up a bunch of trophies. He's still got a couple of that are a wooden base, an Indian teepee with a flag at the top that says K. So yeah, ironic, isn't it? Okay. I heard Scott Darwood, a horror TTRPG writer who sometimes works for Chaosm, opine that Michael Moorcock's Chaos versus Order mytho in his Eternal Champion books, like Elric, Hawkmoon, etc., was an inspiration for the alignment system in D&D. Do I think this is inaccurate? Do I think that this is accurate? Were there any other fictional or real-life influences on the creation of alignment systems? Well, I won't argue, because I know Moorcock's in the Moorcock's is in the appendix N. I'm certain that when Gary wanted to bring order into this chaos, he looked for a defining system, a way to define that type of that aspect, that type of behavioral aspect of the game. Just like I'm sure that the Paladin was hugely influenced by Poul Anderson, 3 Hearts and 3 Lions. And he was also very lawful in that he eschewed distraction, and hewed to what he knew was right. Now, in the original lawful chaotic, there was no neutral good evil. In the original game as it was structured, elves were chaotic because they couldn't be predicted to behave the same way all the time. They were frivolous. They were quixotic. They were pranksters. Before Tolkien, obviously. And the evil, good, neutral came about later. Because when originally signing alignments like that, could they be relied on to behave in a similar fashion? Did they have characteristics? Were they aggressive? Were they timid? Were they, whatever? If they behaved in the same fashion again and again, they were lawful. If you didn't know how in the hell they were going to behave the next time you approached them, that was chaotic. Elves were chaotic. Fairies, sprites, and that, they're all chaotic. Didn't mean they had any evil intentions. Most of them didn't. But what the hell are they going to do next? So it's all such an amalgam of all those things that we read that it's really hard to parse it out. Did it have an effect? I'm certain it did. How much? I don't know. Would guess that would depend on how much Gary liked the writing. Let's see. All right, now, WizardCon. I'm going to choose my words very carefully here. First time con, Kalamazoo, Michigan. Sold a good number of tickets, a very heartening number of tickets, paid for up front, and a disturbing number of no-shows. No particular reason, no weather fluctuations or anything like that. So, while they had sold good numbers, lower numbers showed up. The venue was the 4 Points in Kalamazoo. Nice place, nice people, great time. They had 2 vendor areas, one that was all vendors, and then an adjunct off as part of the big open gaming area with all the tables were some other vendors. And it is my observation, and my opinion only, that the concern about spending on frivolous, unnecessary has hit our industry. And again, I'm not criticizing anybody. Disposable income is getting harder to get. But the attendees did not, how can I put, none, to my knowledge, none of the vendors made a profit, and most of them didn't make expenses. So, I don't understand it. I think that the tariffs and all this shit, people are holding on to their money, and it may account for some of the no-shows. So, I spent that, but I'm not going and spend more money. I don't know. It seemed to be well organized. I ran several games and had a good time every time running games. They ran a signature high-profile game that I ran the adventure from the first Gary Con, and they brought in pizza and drinks and stuff. So it was a lot of fun. I did not hear personally any of the attendees grousing or grumbling, other than the fact that, Yeah, with some of the people, the attendees who didn't come, a few of them were always going to be game masters. So there was a couple of people that were grousing that their game had been canceled because the game master was a no-show. But there was a pretty good effort to get them into something else. I know two of mine were kind of pretty much impromptu pickups, but I was glad to do it, and we had a good time, and it was fun. So I believe they plan on running it again. We'll see what the economy looks like next year. Because the vendors are such a huge supporting leg of the tripod that are game cons that I hate to see them take a bath. I really, really do. So we'll see what happens next year. Now, for the follow-up to that comment that I made at the very beginning about enjoying this 2 or 3 times as much, because there won't be another episode until the 24th of May, because my wife Cheryl and I are going to go cruise Alaska, leaving on the 7th, coming back on the 16th, and I'll be missing 2 weeks of 2 production times. We're going to celebrate our 55th and go look at whales and otters and glaciers. It's taken her 55 years to get me back on board a ship. Because once I got off that ship in the Navy, after we came back from Nam, I've not gone on anything bigger than a sailing boat or a fishing boat. But we're going to do it. So, nothing until then. Sorry. You'll just have to do without me for 2 weeks. And let's see, what else? Is there anything else I had to say? Can't think of anything. Well, I just wasted enough of your time. So I'll say Dodata Govi. Hello, and welcome to my cellar.
The curmudgeon who wrote about the dungeons. Now he's the feller, live from the cellar. Talks about D&D and old school RPGs. Still quite a feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar. Last man around when them rates went down. Calling Gary in that Lake Geneva town. Hey Gary, it's an awful mess. Let me edit, we'll have success. D&D and Dragon Magazine. He's the curmudgeon who wrote about the dungeons. Now he's the feller, live from the cellar. Talks about D&D and old school RPGs, but he's still quite the feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar. Magic missile, it's a mortar shell. Make it hit in the first level spell. Brought psionics to the game to attack that wizard brain. ESR and fantasy, collection of micro armory, Titan with tramp under a tree, high as could be. He's the curmudgeon who wrote about the dungeons. Now he's the feller, live from the cellar. Talks about D&D and old school RPGs, but he's still quite the feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar. Still quite the feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar. Curmudgeon.